Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, peace for now as Benjamin Netanyahu bans Jews and non-Muslims from the Temple Mount for the remainder of Ramadan. And shifting alliances between Iran, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. And remembering as Holocaust Remembrance Day approaches in Israel. Plus, national defense goes to outer space. And celebrating Resurrection Sunday at the Garden Tomb. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israel's government will ban Jewish tourists from the Temple Mount for the last week of Ramadan. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the recommendation of security leaders following clashes between Muslim rioters and Israeli police at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Militants in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria then fired rocket barrages at Israel. Israel responded by targeting terrorist sites. Also, in two separate attacks, terrorists murdered a mother and her two grown daughters, as well as an Italian tourist. Since 2013, Israel has prohibited Jewish visits to the Temple Mount for the last 6 to 10 days of Ramadan. More than 3,000 Jews visited the Temple Mount during this Passover season, a 32% increase over last year. Turning now to Saudi Arabia, where the kingdom hosted landmark delegations from Iran and Syria this week. It's the latest evidence of rapidly shifting alliances in the region. The Iranian delegation visited Riyadh for the official reopening of Iran's embassy in Saudi Arabia. The Mideast rivals shocked the world last month when they agreed to a Chinese-brokered agreement to restore diplomatic relations after 7 years of strife. Iran and Saudi Arabia have backed opposing sides of conflicts throughout the Middle East, and many hope the renewed ties could bring a truce to Yemen's bloody war. Meanwhile, Israel is concerned the Saudis are moving further away from signing a normalization agreement with the Jewish state and getting closer to Iran. Saudi Arabia and Syria are also reestablishing ties, which deteriorated with the outbreak of Syria's civil war more than a decade ago. The Saudi foreign minister hosted his Syrian counterpart this week, and the two countries agreed to reopen embassies and restore flights. Well, a husband and father who lost 3 family members in a terror attack is following this tragedy meant for evil with something good. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, he's given what's been called the ultimate gift of life to others.
As Rabbi Leo D., the husband and father of 3 terror victims, grieved the loss of his wife, he also chose to be thankful.
On Sunday, I talked about looking at the good. Lucy, I have a choice. I could lament over the next 25 years of marriage that I've lost, but I actually feel blessed to have had 25 years of a beautiful marriage with you.
Tragedy struck when terrorists fired on a car carrying Lucy D. and their daughters, Maya and Karine, as they headed to a family vacation. Maya and Karine died immediately, while Lucy lived 3 more days.
Lucy had had 2 bullets, one through her brainstem and one lodged at the top of her spine. There was operation, there was reason for hope, but alas, our family of 7 is now a family of 4.
Rabbi D. praised his wife at her funeral.
Your light has traveled across all of humanity in an instant. You held on so we could honor you individually and give you a unique send-off for a unique soul. A soul that has changed and will continue to change so many lives. May your soul be so bound up in the bond of everlasting life.
As a final tribute, the rabbi donated Lucy's organs to save the lives of others. Doctors transplanted her heart, liver, and kidneys to 4 patients in need. Beilinson Hospital CEO Dr. Eitan Wertheim called organ donation the ultimate gift of life for the recipients. Our hearts break for the D family, who suffered an unimaginable loss, and yet, during their darkest hour, they thought about how Lucy could continue to help others by donating her organs so that these individuals can have a renewed sense of life. The D family immigrated here from the UK in 2014. Rabbi D now sees a greater need to remain and calls on Israelis to unite and the world to support Israel.
If we support the good and reject the evil, then we can all play our part in building a better world.
And he asked everyone to take a symbolic stand.
So make today D's Day. Just share a post with an Israeli flag and let the message out. If we differentiate between good and evil, then we can all help make this world a better place. Do it for your soul. Do it for the souls of Maya, Rena, and Lucy D. Do it for all of humanity. And do it now. It has never been more urgent.
Israeli security forces remain on high alert against the possibility of more attacks, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to find the terrorists and hold them accountable. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, remembering the Holocaust with the chairman of Yad Vashem and celebrating the miracle of Israel today. Next week, Israel will stop to remember the 6 million Jews murdered by Nazis and their collaborators during the Holocaust, or Shoah in Hebrew. I recently spoke with Danny Dayan, chairman of Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial, about its mission of honoring the victims, some of whom are still with us. Danny Dayan, chairman of Yad Vashem, you'll be here in this position for a little over a year. What is it like?
Year and a half since August 2021. And, you know, it's, first of all, it's a privilege to chair, to lead the organization that is the central organization that is dedicated to Holocaust remembrance, to remember and to honor and to educate about the 6 million Jews that were murdered in the Shoah, in the Holocaust, is the privilege of my life. And it's also very challenging. You know, we are in a watershed moment in Holocaust remembrance. Unfortunately, but also inevitably, we are approaching the post-survivor era, the era in which no witnesses, direct witnesses to the horrors of the Shoah will be amongst us. And we have to prepare ourselves, but also prepare the world for that moment, in which I fear will be the happy hour of the denialists and the distortionists. Therefore, our task will be much more difficult, much more challenging, but much more important, much more vital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What does Yad Vashem represent for the Jewish people?
Well, we represent the victims. First of all, we represent the victims of the Shoah. You know, there are many Holocaust organizations in the world. Yad Vashem is the central one. But the other difference is not only a difference in size. It's a difference that Yad Vashem, we care about the victims, the Jewish victims of the Shoah. I will tell you a story. I was in New York not long ago, and I was approached by a person, not Jewish, an Italian-American, that wanted to see me. He came to my hotel with 2 items that he wanted to donate to Yad Vashem. He told me a very moving story. He said, my dad was a GI, was a soldier in the US Army that liberated the camps in Germany, the concentration camps. And now he passed away. I was searching his attic and I found those 2 items. One was a set of photographs, black and white, very small photographs, but extremely graphic, about bodies in the camps that he liberated. And the second was a dagger, a very shining, I even would say beautiful dagger that his father took from an SS officer. And I told him, I want only the photographs. We are not collectors of Nazi memorabilia if they don't have a direct link to an historical event. We care about the victims, not about the perpetrators. So I took the photographs, and he was a little bit puzzled that I didn't take the beautiful dagger.
Yeah, interesting. What does the Holocaust represent to the Jewish people?
Well, our largest catastrophe during 2,000 years of exile, but also a culmination of a process. And you know, the Jewish people during 2,000 years in exile endured innumerable persecutions and discriminations, and then efforts to convert us and to eliminate us, and finally the Holocaust. You know, we are approaching not only Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, but also Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day. And when you understand that only 3 years after the end of the Shoah, the lowest point the Jewish people reached in its exile, we started our redemption process, and we regained our independence after 2,000 years of terrible events. Well, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what a miracle is.
Coming up, is space the next battlefield in modern warfare? See how America is preparing to defend itself and its allies among the stars. Space plays a key role in everyday life, from satellites to GPS. But could it also one day become the scene of a battle between world powers? The U.S. has a brand new military branch dedicated to protecting American and allied interests in this frontier. It's called Space Force.
The United States military plays a key role in protecting this country and world on the ground, water, and in the air. Now it's taking that mission to a new and even more vast frontier.
Space is becoming more and more important to the entire world. And the Space Force is here to protect our American interests and to preserve freedom in space.
Today, space is essential not only to our way of life, it's absolutely critical to the modern way of war. GPS, ATMs, cell phones, gas pumps, traffic lights, power grids.
I'm here on the ops floor of the 22 Space Operations Squadron, and the map behind me shows 7 remote tracking stations, which are equipped with antennas to enable space access.
We facilitate everything from space launch to disposition of end-of-life satellites and everything in between.
Major General Sean Bratton oversees the Space Training and Readiness Command. He sees this new branch as critical to America's future.
We've always flown these spacecraft. We didn't just invent them all with the stamp of the Space Force. We flew them as part of the Air Force. But there's been change recently. We've really seen potential adversaries move into the space domain, begin to threaten our capabilities. And I think that drove Congress to think through and finally decide to enact or create a new service specifically focused on the space domain.
The service's uses of its spacecraft include communication, GPS, and more military-specific needs.
The missile warning spacecraft, for example, so we can look and observe missile launches around the world, primarily to warn the joint force.
Bratton confirms the greatest threats in this arena are China and Russia.
Both have considerable space capability. We see them testing weapons now in the space domain, which is new behavior in the past kind of 10 to 15 years. And so I think that gives us cause for caution and causes us to really think about how do we protect and defend our capabilities in space.
Brad Bowman serves as Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He says the space domain is hotly contested.
Even as China and Russia are fielding capabilities, combat capabilities in space to take out our satellites, they're simultaneously trying to take steps at the United Nations to bind our ability or to constrain, limit, reduce into our ability to do the same thing. It's good old Soviet hypocrisy at its best.
Lieutenant Colonel Brian Day oversees around 400 Space Force Guardians and government civilians operating close to 30 military communication satellites.
Whether it be operations in the European theater, Pacific theater, in the Middle East, we're supplying all of the communications to ensure that all of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians that are in harm's way have absolutely uninterrupted communications to execute their mission.
Part of the training here focuses on enhanced technical education. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Durand is the provost of the National Security Space Institute, which incorporates virtual reality and augmented reality into the curriculum.
Allow students to have more of a hands-on approach to what is inside of a satellite. What does it look like? What do orbits look like?
This virtual reality simulator allows the students to move in orbit. It helps them to visualize what actually happens when they send commands to a real-life satellite from the Earth.
I also got to try my hands at augmented reality.
So like in a class, you can just like expand it, you can contract it, you can look at the different dimensions of it. Basically, it causes the coursework to come alive.
Exactly.
Another aspect of preparing Guardians involves taking part in war game simulations.
If they do not have the opportunity to face a threat in a training environment, when they have to meet the real threat, they're not going to be as equipped.
Master Sergeant Joshua Mauser showed us a representation of what's called a direct ascent anti-satellite missile.
That is literally just a missile that is launched from the ground with the intention of striking an object that is orbiting in a low Earth orbit. It's a very serious threat.
Space Force Weapons Officer Captain Mike Foley describes the space domain as constantly evolving.
As the world gets more interested in returning to the moon, landing astronauts again on the lunar surface, that adds a whole new layer of complexity to the space domain, where now we're not just worried about our geosynchronous satellites in orbit, we're worried about the space all the way out to the moon.
And when you think of the moon, astronauts might come to mind, but don't confuse NASA with the Space Force.
NASA is the science side of things, if you will, the exploration. Our job is to protect and defend the domain, so that includes NASA.
The Space Force motto is Semper Supra, which means always above. And as space plays a growing role in everyday life, it becomes clear of the need for a military to keep its eyes on what's above in order to secure our freedom. Mark Martin, CBN News, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Still ahead, join us at the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem for a special celebration of the resurrection of Jesus. Thank you for watching Jerusalem Dateline. We're committed to providing you with unbiased reporting from the Holy Land. Through weekly broadcasts, podcasts, and online media, our vision is to reach millions around the globe with the true story of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East, all from a biblical and prophetic perspective. This is a big vision and is only made possible by the generous support of people like you.
Call us toll-free at 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Jerusalem Dateline and make a donation that will help spread the light of truth about Israel throughout the world.
Christians from around the world gathered at the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem on Easter Sunday to celebrate our risen Lord. Here's a special look at the Garden Tomb service.
Welcome to the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem for this celebration of the risen Lord.
And today, we are at the epicenter, where the central events in the history of the earth took place. Right over there is a visual aid. It's either the tomb from which Jesus was raised, or it's one very like it. And the tomb was empty.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.